The Effects of the Zones of Regulation on Affective Needs Program Students by Alex Peters, Katie Atkinson, and Cindy Mott.
Students attending center-based programming specifically geared towards affective needs have increased difficulty with identifying their current emotional state and how best to regulate themselves during that time. Due to this difficulty, these students have a more difficult time being able to access their education across settings. Students who exhibit these difficulties need assistance and explicit instruction in how to self-regulate their emotions, including determining what emotion they are feeling and how to best cope at that time using taught strategies. By conducting a study of this nature that looks at the effects of a self-regulation curriculum within an affective needs center-based program, it will help identify effective curriculums and/or strategies to help teach students self-regulation.
The purpose of this study is to explore the relationship between the Zones of Regulation curriculum and an affective needs program and the effect that it has on students' ability to self-regulate after the lessons have been implemented and taught. This study will be used to determine if the implementation of the Zones of Regulation curriculum will have a positive effect on the students' ability to self-regulate, as well if it will have an overall positive impact on their overall academic achievement, positive behaviors, and relationships with peers. The research question the study is looking to answer is, does the implementation of the Zones of Regulation curriculum affect students' abilities to self-regulate emotions among elementary school-aged children, grades K through 5, in affective needs programming? Our hypothesis for this study is stated as, there is a strong relationship between the implementation of the Zones of Regulation curriculum and the increase of emotional self-regulation and coping skills of students with affective needs deficits.
For our literature review, we looked at the literature review completed by Leah Copiers, who is the author of the Zones of Regulation curriculum. She researched the areas of self-regulation, neurobiological disorders, specifically autism spectrum disorders and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and learning styles and teaching strategies for students with neurobiological impairments. With this information, she later developed a curriculum called the Zones of Regulation to teach students with neurobiological impairments to self-regulate. Copiers specifically researched articles associating self-regulation and children with autism spectrum disorders and attention deficit hyperactive disorder, or ADHD. Both groups of children have difficulty in emotional regulation and social cognition, set shifting and planning, lagging in self-control skills, recognizing facial expressions and interpreting emotions, and therefore the curriculum that the author is to create needs to target emotional recognition, executive functioning, sensory integration, and social cognition in order to learn how to self-regulate internally.
Mooney, Ryan, Uning, Reed, and Epstein state that students with emotional and behavioral disorders, EBD, generally struggle to succeed academically in schools. For these students, the ability to self-regulate their emotions is increasingly difficult and shows the need for interventions to be put in place. As students with emotional and behavioral disorders, it is seen that the academic deficits can increase over time, causing lack of achievement and an increased inability to regulate emotions and integrate into society. Since students with EBD often do not manage their own behavior, self-management skills need to be taught to them. Effective programs for developing self-management skills are those that offer systematic instruction. This also allows for the students to be able to make purposeful choices of how to manage their own behavior after this point. The idea is that students should be able to identify cues for how to self-manage and self-regulate their own emotions.
In the YAC 2015 study, the researchers were aiming to determine if the development of self-regulation skills affects adaptation to school and overall school success for students in kindergarten through the implementation of the Zones of Regulation curriculum. They looked specifically at the following self-regulation skills: raising their hand, verbally expressing feelings, maintaining their personal space, following teacher directions, talking to peers, waiting for directions, listening to adults, and staying in their assigned areas. The data showed that there was a functional relationship between self-regulation skills and the direct instruction of the Zones of Regulation curriculum.
The design of this research study will be the implementation of 10 Zones of Regulation curriculum lessons. The first 5 lessons will teach students how to identify their emotions using various zones, blue, green, yellow, or red. The remaining 5 lessons will teach students how to identify coping skills that work best for them to use whenever they are in a specific zone. The participants will be given a pre-assessment assessing self-regulation skills and abilities to identify emotions prior to the implementation of the zone's lessons. After implementation of the first 5 lessons, progress monitoring will be administered, again assessing self-regulation skills. The remaining 5 lessons will be implemented again and the same self-regulation assessment will be administered. This design will help determine if the zones of regulation is an effective curriculum to use, teaching this population of students self-regulation skills. By administering a pre-assessment, mid-assessment, as well as a post-assessment, this will show whether or not the students are able to demonstrate self-regulation skills. The lessons will be taught in a whole group setting with all students over a 2-week time period.
The participants that will be involved in this study will be the estimated 250 students between the ages of 5 and 11 who are currently receiving special education supports in an effective needs classroom across the Denver metro area school districts. The majority of these students are all on IEPs under the identification of either serious emotional disability and some under the identification of developmental delay. This population of students has been selected for this research because all students struggle with their ability to self-regulate. The sampling method that was chosen for this research was a probability sampling method, cluster sampling, selecting a group of students who are naturally together. This was chosen as these students are alike with respect to the characteristics relevant to the variables of the study, specifically difficulties with emotional regulation. The instruments to be used for this research proposal will be the Zones of Regulation curriculum and self-regulation checklists. Self-regulation skills will be identified as impulse control, sustaining attention, planning, problem solving, and self-talk.
Self-regulation skills will also be monitored by teacher observation. And this is our resources.
Thanks for watching.